Oh, mainly for our own personal reasons, for like as a family, or if the children ever ask questions when they were older, I had something that I could fall back on and just give them that I'd written down from our perspective of it, like what we went through in the journey. So it wasn't initially I'm gonna write a story. Each time I was writing stuff down, I was thinking I could add a bit more to that and add a bit more to it. And I move on, and gradually one thing turned into another, and it was pretty much a really lengthy explanation of the whole journey. So it kind of
Mm.
it pieced itself together more than anything.
Yeah. Well, we're here with Lee Rich, Lee Crouch, and Lee. You've been on the podcast before. We're really pleased to have you back. And Lee was just
Pleased to be
talking
here.
there. Yeah, good to see you. And Lee was just talking about how he's put down on paper his experiences with social services, and then we're going to get to that, Lee, about why you did that and where you're up to with that. In the meanwhile, it would be good to actually circle back to what were the things that your experiences that kicked all of this off.
Yeah, it was over. It was we had a history for a few years with local authority and social services, and see, we'd made mistakes through difficult times and things which we knew where we went wrong. Could have potentially had a bit more support from local authority to help us with it rather than end up where we did. But ultimately, it ended up obviously in a courtroom and a judgment being made, which mentioned it before and said it just when you hear those words like permanence and safety and that's all against you, is a bit like a cell door slamming in your face in your life, and you're expected to carry on and move on with like almost not no feeling, but it's almost like you're completely disregarded in the background and no one wants to listen to you. So we kind of
Mm.
just like we made a decision not to let that end it and continue working on ourselves, even though it wasn't essentially listened to at the beginning in the courts. We carried on doing what we was doing,
What
which
was
was
that
mainly for us.
judgment? What was that judgment that was made at then, Lee, when you referenced that cell door slamming? What was that? What happened?
That was the obviously the care plan for our children to be two of them moved into long-term foster care, and the two youngest ones to be potentially put up for adoption. So it was kind of a heartbreaking end of the road for us. But
Really significant
yeah,
day.
it was a
Yeah.
significant day, yeah. But it
Mm.
also was it was a significant day. It was heartbreaking, it was daunting. There was really big emotions, obviously. There was big emotions between me and my partner. Um almost broke us, but we decided to fight together rather than with each other. Um make some moves which ultimately ended up with all four children being on a long term care plan rather than adoption, because we took that back to court ourselves. Unfortunately,
Mm.
run out of funds, couldn't pay for the legal backing anymore, so I had to represent myself, well, the whole family myself, which was I can't give you the words for that. How difficult that was. I'm clued up on how it was working and what the background was, but what I didn't have a clue on was how to attack that legally. So I
Mm.
kind of went in blindsided with the notes that we already had from the solicitor, what they did for us. I used them, and then just I went into the court and spoke from the heart, really. And I remember having a conversation with my solicitor at the time. She was like, "I don't advise you to go in and represent yourself," and it was kind of formal and quite blunt. So I said to her, I physically can't afford to pay you anymore. So, but we'd spent five digits at this point. I couldn't physically do it anymore. And I said to her, the information that you've given me is enough to inspire me and for me to know how to go in there and talk. And I ended the conversation with her basically saying that what better person to go and represent our family than the person in the family themselves. We know them that speak from the heart rather than from a paycheck.
And
And
those
it worked.
yeah, and that was one result that you had through your own efforts of you and your partner, that your 4 children, they remained in local authority care, but they weren't adopted. And
Yeah,
then, and that was one step, wasn't it, Lee? Because I know that people listen to this podcast are, some are social workers, some are people interested in social work or human services in different ways. And we're all of us we're interested in the human story, but we're also interested in ways in which a practice things can be done well with people that improve lives. And really highlighted some areas through the course of your experience with social services where you thought things needed to be done differently. And I wondered if you could talk about those with us. The first one I thought would be useful for you to mention was the family contact. Maybe explain. I mean, what is that? You know, the contact. What is it like, and how did you try to change it in your situation?
so the family contact, it was obviously, it's great, and family contact is something that's needed, but for us it felt like it was it's felt like it's something that's given as a reward to parents that deserve it, rather than rather than actually being a lifeline to the family and to keep that deep connection between you and you and your children, whoever you're having contact with. It's such an important thing to have that there, and it's looked at, like I say, it's looked at like a reward. You get given a schedule, and then you're sitting in contact. You've got, if you're in a room, you're sitting there, you got someone taking notes, and then like, kids are uncomfortable, you're uncomfortable, you feel like you can't be natural, like obviously these people are all of a sudden monitoring you, like safeguarding you and everything, and it's especially for the first year or so, it's really daunting for parents and the children. Sometimes we'd sit in the contact room, waiting room, we wouldn't know how the children would present themselves when they turn up. They're confused. They've just been, they've had their family torn apart. They've been ripped away. They've been given to strangers at that point in time. And then they're being told, and we're being told, we can have like little snippets, like little trickles of each other's lives. So like, they don't know how close you are behind closed doors. We had our issues and our problems, but what the system didn't know is how well founded and are the foundations of our family. It's very close knit, and the children they're always comfortable with us. They're always grounded. They knew who they were. They had a sense of self identity with us. In the
Yeah.
contact centers, it's a little bit, I don't know. It's great, but it's almost like it's given as a reward rather than a necessity. So I decided to, after after a few sessions and crying in the car on the way home, not like with my partner, or pulling over and talk because can't concentrate on driving because your eyes are watering. So when you have conversations, and I sat there and thought to myself one day, well, what can we do about it? Where can we go with this, and how can we approach it? And then I remember back to the day we was in court. I never thought I could walk into a courtroom with a with a whole panel full of professionals and people higher up, and speak from my heart and get what we wanted. So I thought I can try and do that same thing, and try and put that out into.
And what did you ask for, Lee?
We asked for extended contact at first. It was met with some raised eyebrows and a lot of questions and a lot of safeguarding. And this
What do
was
you mean? What do you mean extended?
so with extended contact. So at first we was only seeing them for an hour and a half, once every 3 months. Obviously we've got 4 children, and an hour and a half once every 3 months, like from a family that had just spent 24/7 with each other. And honestly, when there was nothing we didn't approach each other with, like the connection was there, and all of a sudden it didn't even have a crack. It had a canyon all the way through it. I wanted to try and push as hard as I could to get to get some more contact. And every contact review, I was pushing it, saying, when can we have more contact? Can we have more contact? Can we have more contact? And it was almost like, we'll look at it, we'll look at it, we'll look at it. And it never actually went anywhere. And then, but with persistence and pushing it, it took about 3.5 years, but eventually, when I mentioned it again, they extended not the length, but the amount of contacts we had. So it went from 3 contacts a year to 6 contacts a year. So in my brain, I've done something. It's not a lot. I'd managed to do something. So then I started pushing again. Like they put a crack in the door. So I put my foot in it, and I was asking more questions, saying that like we're seeing the kids more, but because of the consistency of the contact and how, like, when we was having them and the restrictions, we was only ever allowed to do the same thing, which is like bring board games, bring little picnics, which is also restricted. We couldn't even give our children what they wanted to eat, or we couldn't, taking away the birthdays because they were like obviously targeted on that one child. But I used that as a conversation piece. The children were getting bored. At the end of the day, they're still children. Like the setup and the scenario, like with contact, is there, and it is there to be safeguarded. It's there to monitor us as parents as well. We by this time we were saying, how much more proof do you need? Like every contact, the kids are happy, they're running to us, they're leaving sad because they're having to leave. They're only sad when they're going. Like the contact's great.
And
Lee,
yeah.
what was your relationship, or actually, how did you feel? What were your feelings towards the foster carer or the foster carers when the children were first removed, and then how did those feelings change over time?
From a parent's point of view, the foster carers, it wasn't malice, but it wasn't great. Like these people are strangers to us, and we're supposed to trust these people just because the system says so. Like it's like these are our kids. Like they're not just objects, and so it's very, very difficult. And all of a sudden, you've got strangers that are updating you on your children, tucking them in at night, rubbing their wounds, and singing them songs, and doing all the things that you should be doing.
Yeah.
It's envious, and you can almost see them as enemies rather than allies. Over time, though, I think, especially with the older twos, foster carers, they'd noticed with me and Lisa that what was on paper and what was in front of them is 2 different things. So it was small little conversations, like because the drop offs at contacts and things. It would just be updates on the children, updates on birthdays, talking about gifts, what we're getting them, what they're getting them. It wasn't really to intervene. It was so we was working together. We brought, for example, we brought Sky a phone one year. They brought her all the accessories to match. We brought Leighton the PlayStation 5. They brought him all the accessories to match. So there was no conflict. We didn't know it then, but it was, what we was actually building was co-parenting. And if you fast forward for all the years to where we're at now with them, and to the point where the contact was extended from inside a contact center to actually outside in the community. And I wanted to involve the foster carers in that as well, which was another challenge that was met with like objection and rejection. To be fair, but the foster carers were in it with us. I think it's, at first you're quite bitter and raw. You feel these feelings like these people are not your friends. They've taken your children. We've all seen the news and heard horror stories as well, and you can't help as a parent but to think, what if our children are with people that aren't safe just because of the paperwork says so? We were being judged by paperwork. So at the same time, on the other end of the scale, the foster carers were being judged by paperwork as well, to say that they was good enough, but what in practice said that they wasn't. So it was a very up and down road, but it was also very comfortable, and it was just transparency on both sides, honesty. And you quickly realize that there are different sets of foster carers. There's foster carers that build their relationships with love and trust, and there's some out there that might do it because they want to earn a living. Luckily for us, we've had ones that have been there for the children, and me and Lisa see that. We see that from a couple of about 18 months in, and we started changing our thoughts on these people. There's been like when they had doctor's appointments and everything, we'd have to for the very beginning, we'd have to go and sign paperwork physically. So we'd drive to where they are, and instead of them being really formal about it, like, so, oh, you can't walk in here, the children are in there. It was very welcoming, and there was conversations everywhere, and we started to realize that these people aren't enemies. They're actually like, they're there for the children.
Yeah, one of the things I wrote about in Messy Social Work was that once children came into care, one of the things I had to do was essentially to humanise the children's parents, because the foster carer could often develop quite an easily skewed view about the parents based on what had been written in the reports about them. Because even when the reports are accurately written, they don't ever do any justice to the character of the individual. And also, some foster carers, understandably, I think, could be quite angry towards the parents for some of the harm that they'd caused the children that they were now caring for, and hopefully, not only caring for them but also loving them. And so, I found that facilitating relationships between foster carers and parents became like a critical element of my role, really. And there is research to show that it does actually support stability of the placement. So if you can support the relationship like what you managed to generate, although it sounds like it took you quite a long time, then it actually improves not only your relationship to them, but also the likelihood that the placement will be a stable one.
Yeah, we had it was mainly, the only reason it took so long for us is because of the brick walls that were put in front of us. I think if there was a bit more flexibility from the start, or not like right from the start, but like a lot quicker, like we would have been in that situation a lot sooner. And that was obviously, and rightly so, that was the system's way of safeguarding and making, like, they have to keep these boundaries up. But my argument was like children based. Like my children, when we had that relationship with the foster carers, they wasn't confused anymore. There wasn't no confusion to what they could talk to us about, what they could approach their foster carers about. Like like when they're seeing us or when they're seeing the foster carers, it's two different families. It completely eliminated it. The children knew that they were loved. Mentioned it plenty of times in my book. The children were loved in stereo. And that's such an important thing, because they all of a sudden, they didn't have these two separate lives and two separate people. Everybody was one life. They had two sets of fridges for the pictures, four sets of arms at each end of the pitch. It makes such a difference.
That's a really beautiful analogy and a form of words that they were loved in stereo, Lee. Wow. That's wonderful. And it seems to me when I first spoke to you, you were asking questions of the system, and you've talked about the things that were really difficult. But the questions that you asked were, why is it possible to co-parent, or why can't we co-parent? Why can't we operate in stereo with foster carers as parents of children that are in care? And then you also asked some questions about family time, not just about the frequency and the time, but also you asked, why can't the extended family be part of that contact to maintain the links that your children have with the whole family in its wider form? So those questions felt like, although there were lots of, in your referencing difficulties and brick walls, across the course of time, you established a collaborative relationship with the local authorities to the extent that those things changed. How were you able to do that? Can you pinpoint why you were able to affect those changes?
I think getting to the point of those changes, it was just not talking about it. Like I was talking about it, obviously, but like there's only so much you can talk about before you've got raw information, and and thanks to a couple of IROs, I managed to sit down in front of a the case manager for our children, and I presented her with all this evidence. And in that evidence, all of these factors I had, and I could give to her, how the contact, how it started, how it went, the problems that we had, the foster carers' involvement, and how important it was. The extended family, was actually one of the biggest fights I had, because they couldn't understand why I was fighting and pushing so hard to have that. But the reality is, these are the children's maternal grandparents. There was a couple of cousins, and both of my eldest children that wasn't in the care system because they were too old, they're partners. So my two youngest had such a massive bond with my partner's boyfriend at the time, but because he was my partner's he was my daughter's boyfriend, he was pushed to the side and said, well, they're not family, they're not seeing them. But then when we're going to contact, the children were asking about them. When can I see Dan? When can I do this? And when can I do that? So, but when I put all this in front of Patricia and spoke to her, and did it in a way where it wasn't like, this is what I want from you, and this is what I want. I put it in a way to say, this is what we need. And this is the evidence. This is what the children are asking for. And this is why we're here. We're here for the children. Like, everything else is irrelevant. I know it might not be. It's protocoled and procedured, but once I put everything in front of the correct people, the words were, we need to look at this and rebuild the whole thing.
One of the things that you write about, Lee, in the book is that the goal isn't to compete for love, but to cooperate in care. And this is your words: when love stops competing and starts cooperating, children get to win. And I think that speaks to what you were advocating for your children, was that instead of the system kind of setting up these divisions and there being a competition between the adults in and around the children, it's about bringing them together.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I mean, referencing that part is because that's one of the deepest parts of me, and the other bit of it as well is, when adults unite, children thrive, and it's true. So,
move in a positive direction. The thing that struck me about you, Lee, is you're a person who has ideas, and I think we need ideas from all quarters, and certainly the people that have lived it can really come forward with the strong ideas and the insights to reform the system. So that's what really struck me about you, and that's why I'm really excited you're continuing getting the message out there, and like really on the podcast, Lee, and giving an update about what you're up to. It's really, really good to see you. Yeah. All right, take care.
Thanks, guys.